looks like the majority have rolled in right now, so I'll get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Emily Kravit. I am the External Relations Coordinator here at the Rome campus of Temple University. Thank you for joining us here today. We are so excited to talk with you and give you some hopefully valuable information as you are applying to colleges anywhere and everywhere. The goal of today's presentation is to really just be a guide to the financial aid process, to FAFSA, and also the resources that you may have as a military member and how to take advantage of this, again, as you're applying to university and in university. Should you go to the next slide, please, Cassie? So I will introduce all of us so you know who is speaking with you. As I said, I'm Emily. I am working at the Rome campus and I work specifically with the Temple Rome Entry Year program. And I'll talk for just 1 minute about that before we get started. We also have with us Cassie, who is the Assistant Director at our Student Financial Services Office, and she'll be speaking about FAFSA and applying to financial aid in general and the types of aid that you can look out for. We also have Christy and Deborah, who are both from our Military and Veteran Services Center at Temple University. And they will talk about the types of benefits that are offered for military members and again, what to look out for as you're applying to college. And so I will give you a brief introduction. Next slide, please. On just Temple in general, again, so you know who is speaking with you. What our background is. So Temple is a large urban public university. Our main campus is based in Philadelphia. We have about 30,000 undergraduate students. We have over 150 different majors to choose from. So really whatever students want to study, we usually have options for them. We also have a 13-to-1 student faculty ratio. So despite being a large university in this great city of Philadelphia with so many majors to choose from, it really does feel like a small university environment because our classes are so small, with about an average of 20 people. Next slide, please. And along with the academics and feeling like we're a small university, we also have so many opportunities to take advantage of as a student. So I went to Temple, I played softball there as a student, I was in various different clubs. I was a visual studies major, so we had a club for our major, but there are many clubs of every type that you can imagine. If there isn't a club that you see that you're interested in, you can always start one. And we're also an R1 research institution, which means that we are among the with American universities that host the highest level of research activity. We have faculty, professors coming from all over the world. We have high class research facilities. So it's a really great place to do anything STEM as well. Next slide, please. And with everything there is to offer regarding clubs and academics, we also have multiple locations. We have our 3 campuses, or 4 campuses actually. So we have the Ambler and the main campus in the Pennsylvania, Philadelphia area. We have our Rome campus where I'm based off of. And then we also have our Tokyo, Japan campus. So students can study all around the world, still see Temple flags, have Temple classes, Temple faculty, and still have the Temple experience, but do it all around the world. And one way that students can do that, in the next slide, please, is through Temple's entry year program options. Next slide, please. Sorry. You have to click a couple times for some of them. So we have options where you can start your degree in Rome. Since we're talking to the DEA schools in the Europe area, you could start in Rome, be a little bit closer to home before going to Philadelphia or Japan. You could also start in Japan before going to Philadelphia. So these are just some of your options that I wanted to lay out for you so you know, again, who is speaking with you today. So I know that we're not here to talk about Temple. We're here to give you some resources for applying to school. So I'm going to hand it off first to Cassie, who is going to talk about FAFSA and financial aid. If anyone has any questions throughout this entire presentation, please do not hesitate to put them in the chat or in the Q&A, excuse me, and we will read off questions at the end or answer them as we go, depending on the question. So without further ado, Cassie, go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks. So yes, my name is Cassie. I work in student financial services. And so I'm going to go over the financial aid application process as we handle it. Main campus student financial services processes aid for all of our satellites. And so anywhere where the students are going, usually their aid will come through my office in some capacity. So applying for financial aid has been streamlined a bit. It is now only available at studentaid.gov. The website is mobile friendly, so students can do this using the web browser on their phone, but ultimately it is a web-based application. Students should also be cognizant of institutional deadlines. At Temple University, our priority deadline is February 1st. So students who submit their FAFSA before then are evaluated for federal, state, and institutional aid. Students who apply after that deadline are only evaluated for federal and state aid. Students who are eligible for aid must be either US citizens or an eligible non-citizen. They have to have earned a high school diploma or its equivalent. They need to be enrolled in a degree or certificate granting program at an eligible college or career school. Students must have a valid social security number in order to complete the application. Their parents do not, because they can print the form and sign it, but students must have a valid social security number to confirm their eligibility. Once enrolled, students must also meet the satisfactory academic progress standard at the institution in accordance with federal regulations. And what that basically means is students need to pass their classes and they need to pass at least 2/3 of their credits in order to retain their eligibility. So when you're looking to complete the FAFSA, like I mentioned before, studentaid.gov is the website. We're using something called prior tax year information. So the FAFSA, starting in 2017-18, started becoming available on October 1st instead of January 1st. As a result, you can't use last year's tax information. My slide is wrong. I just realized that. For 22-23, we're basing students' eligibility off of the 2020 tax year. For 23-24, which opened 3 days ago, we are only using 2021's tax information. We can't use 22's information because you haven't filed your taxes because the year isn't over. So when the FAFSA is completed, it should be completed with the most recent completed year, which is 2021, for the upcoming 23-24 academic year. Now, we do understand that in having such a large gap between when you're filing the FAFSA and the tax year being used on it, especially coming out of that minor global thing that we just had go on for a couple of years, students might have issues of dependency. They might have issues where their income has changed. What's being reported doesn't reflect the actual circumstances that the family is experiencing. And so in those cases, students are encouraged to reach out to the financial aid office so we can guide them through steps on how to appeal those changes. In our office, we have a change of income form. Students complete a web-based form, provide some documentation, and we reevaluate their eligibility. In terms of dependency issues, so issues where students can't provide their parental data, we have a team of counselors overseen by an assistant director who works with this population to help them complete the application in order to be reviewed and eligible for aid. So when you're going to complete it, there's some basic information you need. First and foremost, students need their full legal name. That's the name on their social security card, not the name they go by. So if they're Richard James and they go by Jim, they have to put Richard James on the FAFSA. They can't go by Rick or Rich or Jim or any other nickname. It must be the legal name on the social security card. This comes up more often than you think. They need to know their date of birth and their social security number. It might seem like a given that they will know this information, but it's important to double check the documents and make sure that everything is entered correctly. Even a digit discrepancy on the date of birth or the social security number can prevent a student from successfully filing. They also need to provide an email address. And this is important because the FAFSA will use that email to send the student information about their application. It should be a different email from the parents. Parents can provide an email under the parent section, but the students should have an email that they have access to for multiple years. So we don't recommend using a high school email. They should create one with Gmail or Yahoo or any of the other servers that is not tied to their enrollment somewhere in order to retain access. The reason for that being is that they will have to verify their email, and if they forget their username or password, that email is how they retrieve it. If they lose access to their high school email after a year or two, they will have a very difficult time creating that account. In terms of income or tax information, the student and or parent federal tax returns are required for that specific year. So for the upcoming year, you need 2021's tax information. The dependency status dictates whose information is required. So students who are under the age of 24, who cannot answer yes to one of the dependency questions, are required to provide their parent income and their parents' biographical information. So they have to make sure they have the correct information available. This includes the 1040s, employer issued W-2s, and any asset and investment information. So when completing the FAFSA and applying for additional aid, a question that comes up a lot is applying for free money. So free money or gift aid comes in different categories. There's need-based, which falls under the FAFSA, state grants, and institutional aid, but subject to deadlines, and scholarships, which is merit-based. So that requires admission scholarships, outside scholarships. There are institutional scholarships, but again, there's application deadlines as well. So students should be aware of what those deadlines are to make sure that they meet those needs. So when you're thinking about applying for financial aid, there's really 5 steps to think about. Students should apply for the gift aid or the free money first. That means knowing your deadlines, making sure you submit all of your applications on time. Complete the FAFSA and the state grant applications. When students file the FAFSA, it will tell them, oh, we see you're a resident of this state. Would you like to complete the state grant application? And we'll more often not bridge them over. And so it's important that students follow that process through and complete that additional application. When they apply to schools and they get their aid offers, they should compare them carefully. Be cognizant of what the bottom line is. Don't be distracted by, well, this school gave me a scholarship for $20,000 and that scholarship gave me a scholarship for this amount. Because when you're looking at the ultimate bottom line, sometimes those numbers are deceptive. You want to be aware of what's owed after the gift aid, and that can make the difference. And then finally, when you're ready to commit to an institution, you want to make sure that you have the money lined up. You have your financial plan in place. You know how you're going to pay that bill and how you're going to be able to move through the next 4 years. You can absolutely contact the financial aid office. We're more than happy to walk students through that. So I know a couple questions came in. If it's all right, I'll go ahead and address those. All right. So first question I have is, last year my students had issues entering international phone numbers into the web-based application. Did FAFSA notice or address this? To the best of our knowledge, no, they have not addressed it. The FAFSA application does not do well and handle well students who attend overseas or who live abroad. It is a very domestic-based application, and unfortunately, we were not provided any information about them updating and addressing students who live abroad. Second question is, when we register on studentaid.gov website, do we create the account as a parent or as a student? This is a great question, both. The student needs their own account with an FSA ID and password. The parent, if they are a US citizen or eligible non-citizen, needs their own FSA ID and password. And this is because the student and the parent uses that ID to electronically sign the FAFSA. You must both have an account. You should create it 3 days before you're ready to complete the FAFSA, because it will do a check against the Social Security Administration to ensure that you are who you say you are based on that information. So you need one for the parent and you need one for the student. You also cannot share emails. So you should have a parent email and a student email to access those. Follow-up question, do both parents need accounts or just one? Nope, it's you only need one account per parent. If one parent is going to be taking point on helping to complete these applications and helping them file the FAFSA, then only the one parent needs an FSA ID. If you have two parents reported on the FAFSA, you do not have a place for both parents to sign. So you only need one parent with an account. And then other question we have is if LQA should be claimed as income on the FAFSA. I'm going to admit I am not familiar with LQA. So I am going to have to get back with that and figure that one out. That's a new one. I haven't gotten that one before.
We'll make a note of that and we'll get back to you.
Okay, great.
Cassie, do you have any suggestions regarding the phone number question? Do you have suggestions on workarounds for that? If there's a, you know, is there a different way to input the phone number so that the application submits correctly? Do you have any suggestions?
Right. So for the phone number, you don't believe you are required to report a phone number. To the best of my knowledge, the Department of Education doesn't actually call students. They tend to email or send snail mail. So you most likely could get away with just not putting in a phone number. If you are required to put a phone number in, just do the best you can. Again, they don't generally call. Okay, so I have a couple of answers rolling in. The LQA is living quarters allowance for military. There is a place on the FAFSA where you have to report non-educational veterans benefits or military benefits. So that may qualify as that. I would read the fine print on the question itself, and then ask the financial aid office if you're still not sure. For LQA, if it is living quarters allowance for military, that might have to be included because it qualifies as untaxed income. All right, and I think that that answers all of the questions we have.
Yeah, another point in the chat was that I've seen this as well on students' applications, that if you are living abroad, students tend to just put stateside numbers if they have those available.
Yeah.
So if that is it for the financial aid presentation, we will round up again at the end with any questions. So if you still have questions about financial aid, please do not hesitate to keep putting those in the Q&A. I think I will now introduce Christy and Deborah, who will talk about benefits for military members.
Hooray, hooray. Hello, folks. My name is Christy Furiosi. Just as background on who I am the Assistant Director of Military and Veteran Services. I've been in this position for a little over a year. I transitioned from active duty Army, if I have any Army folks on this webinar, back from Fort Lewis, Washington and Seattle, and then I made my trek over to Philadelphia, and I've been working with Deborah. And again, these military folks on here will appreciate this idea that Deborah is the best NCO that I've ever had. Deborah's been working in this position much longer than I have, so we're going to go through our slides. If you have any questions, I'll likely defer to Deborah because, again, she's the NCO in charge. So next slide, we'll see.
Cassie, I think you still have to advance them. I'm sorry. We had some tech issues before.
I'm not in control. Okay, and then next slide. We're going to get it rolling. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to say, it's the proclamation, the Temple Proclamation. Deborah and myself, the Military and Veteran Services Center, we have nothing to do with your benefits. This is all the VA, as we know. So any benefits you are receiving, Deborah and I have no control over, nor do we have any sway, of course. So if you are going to use your VA education benefits, and of course, if we're talking about high school students, the two that would apply most are the Chapter 33, that's the post 9/11 GI Bill, and Chapter 35, which is the Dependents Education Assistance. With Chapter 33, if you are the service member or if you are the veteran and you want to give it to your child or your spouse, you'll have to do a transfer of entitlement. And so how that is completed, it's all through the VA website. You're going to use your login.gov or your CAC, log in. You yourself as the sponsor, before you transfer this benefit, you are going to apply for the benefit. This is again with post 9/11. So when you apply, based on your time in service, they are going to issue you a certificate of eligibility. This is going to state exactly what percentage you are eligible for. Again, percentage is kind of based on your time in service. I'm sure a lot of folks in this webinar know exactly what I'm chatting about. So you applied for the benefit, and the next step is for your dependent to apply for the benefit. So they will actually go in through the same process as you. They will simply apply for the benefit as a dependent. And the first question the VA is going to ask is, has the sponsor completed the transfer of entitlement? So kind of a two-step process, if you will. You apply for the benefit, then you transfer. Third step being your child or your spouse applies for the benefit. And then the VA will issue a certificate of eligibility in the dependent's name. And then chapter 35 is the dependent's education assistance. Again, this is really for folks who have any service-connected disability. If you are permanently disabled, you are able to apply for a benefit for your children. This is only a month, I shouldn't say only, this is a monthly stipend, whereas the post 9/11 is a tuition and fees as well as a monthly stipend. The other benefits listed here, they're really for folks who are still in the service or veterans. The chapter 31, this might be good for y'all to know. It used to be called VOC Rehab, Vocational Rehabilitation. It's now Veteran Readiness and Employment. And then the chapter 30, of course, the Montgomery GI Bill, and chapter 1606 is for our folks in the select reserves. Deborah, did I miss anything?
No, you have not.
See, I'm doing much better than last year. Here we go. Next slide.
You're doing excellent.
So if you folks are at all curious about, what benefits I'll be getting if I apply for these benefits, the VA outlines it. They have a fantastic comparison tool that you can literally Google VA comparison tool. Right now, you toggle through. Right now it's set to a veteran, but this would be the same as a dependent. So if you're the dependent, it's still the same allocations. It's set for the 100% benefit level, meaning you've spent 36 months or more on active duty. Again, that changes, and if you're a service obligation, whatever your service obligations are. Just of note, tuition and fees for chapter 33 post 9/11 are paid directly to the school, directly to Temple University. You're not going to see that money at all. The housing allowance and book stipend are paid directly to the benefit user. I was about to say sponsor, but it's paid directly to whoever has the benefit via the direct deposit when you sign up. With that, if your student is living in a dorm or has a meal plan, the GI Bill is not going to pay for that. The monthly allowances you received are used to offset those costs, but just know that that is up to you to pay. Again, the only thing that is being paid to Temple are the tuition and fees. And so, for instance, if you are covered 50% post 9/11 GI Bill, the other 50% of the bill is up to you to pay. If you have any questions about, doing the math on that, Deborah and I would be happy to get on a call and calculate with you. But just 50%, 60%, whatever benefits you have, just know what you're responsible for.
I want to add,
Christy,
I want to add, and this is only because I just got off of a call from a parent who is receiving the student is receiving chapter 33, and this parent has that BAH monthly stipend going into his account, okay, so that he can dole out that monthly stipend as he sees fit to his daughter. So not necessarily the dependent, or whoever is either the dependent or the parent can have the money, the stipend deposited into their account as they see fit. So that's for you parents who want to make sure that the money is used the way you want it to be used.
Y'all are in control of these finances. Next slide, please. This is a lot of words. And if you're like me, when I was in the military and I heard a school was yellow ribbon, I just thought it meant they were military friendly. I didn't know it had any association with it. However, yellow ribbon is for folks who are post 9/11 GI Bill. They're using the post 9/11 GI Bill at the 100% benefit level, and they are truly bluely out of state. So what it does is just covers it offsets the cost between the out of state and state tuition rate. So you'd only be paying the in-state tuition rate. Next slide. Deborah, did I cover that okay? Okay, Deborah gave me the nod. So this leads into Pennsylvania Act 11. So if you are, out of state, but your student is coming to live in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania on Temple's campus, there is this really rad thing called Pennsylvania Act 11. Deborah and I did not create it. This was all an act of Pennsylvania legislation. So if you are if you are eligible, you don't even have to be using any of the GI Bill benefits listed there, 30, 31, 33, 35, all of them. If you are eligible for them and if you have a Pennsylvania address, we grant you in-state tuition. You are converted to an in-state resident, regardless of previous years lived in Pennsylvania. So this is especially relevant if your student is living in a residence hall. All you do is show proof of living in a residence hall, which is simply a screenshot of your housing assignment. If you live off campus, it's just a campus lease being uploaded. This is really impactful for the folks using Chapter 35 benefits, that dependents education assistance, because again, that's only giving you a monthly stipend. And if you're out of state using Chapter 35, that extra money from the in-state versus out of state is a very large sum. Deborah, did I miss anything? Hooray. I think this is my last, oh, no, next slide. Excuse me, I'm getting over COVID myself. Okay, so our resources. All the resources you can imagine, traditional to every student campus, but I will throw out the Temple Veterans Association. We're talking to students who might be coming from high school who aren't service members or veterans themselves. But one of the things that Deborah and I are doing is really promoting an inclusive space for military connected students, that being dependents. The Temple community and especially our office, we understand the transition that service members and veterans make, but we also understand the transition for dependents, especially if you folks are living overseas and traveling a lot. This is a very I don't want to say a vulnerable population, but we understand that these life circumstances can be overwhelming, and so finding a community of folks who share similar experiences could be really impactful. So the TVA is open to dependents as well. We have quite a few dependents visiting our office. Deborah can attest, folks who want to get involved, folks who just want to share their story about their parent or their spouse's military service. So our office is always open and TVA is always welcome. And I think that was the last slide for us. Deborah, do you have anything to add?
No, nothing to add.
I did it.
I will say this space, and I'm in the space actually today. You can even come by and get coffee and tea and snacks. Okay.
I'll be coming by to visit when I'm in Philadelphia.
Exactly.
Well, thank you everyone so much. I wanted to just read aloud one other question that we got in the Q&A, just so anyone who's hearing the recording or who's listening in hears it as well. Because I think this applies to more than one person. So the question was, I understand you do not need to list your primary residence as an asset, but not sure if that applies to us because we're not currently living in our home statewide. The answer to that is your primary residence is not listed as an asset, but any additional residencies that you own should be listed. And then the follow-up question to that is, are you living in a residence that you own outright? So Cassie, I don't know if you want to address that. I don't know the ins and outs. You might be able to address that better than me just reading the answer. I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Sure. So if you are living abroad in a home that you own, in addition to what is your primary residence, then, or if your home abroad is your primary residence, but you own a home stateside, one of those has to be listed as assets if you have them. Because Basically, the Department of Education considers those additional properties as investments, as net worth, as funds that could potentially be liquidated to support your students' education. And so if you do have more than one home, the home that you live in the most, or at least 51% of the year, would be considered your primary residence. And you don't have to list the net value of that home, but any others do. Now, if you're living abroad in military housing or some other type of housing that you don't own, then the value of those assets don't have to be reported because they're not your owned assets. So what they're looking for in this question are investments, which could be either, your stash account, your, financial investments, or investments in real estate or land, things that could potentially be liquefied to help pay for your students' college, or a stream of income that you have. So if you have a second home that you use as an Airbnb most of the year and you stay at 1 or 2 times, that has to get listed too. That's really what they're trying to get there with that question.
Thank you, Cassie. It might be helpful, just before we close, could you go back to the contact information slide for student financial services? Because there are some useful links in there that it might be helpful for participants to screenshot. There's the Temple Student Financial Services website, but there's also the FAFSA website on there, education planner. I don't know if there's any that you want to point out specifically, Cassie, but I think it might be helpful for everyone who is applying for financial aid to screenshot these resources so you have them all in one place, and you can use that to start applying for financial aid this year.
Absolutely. I really honestly would have to give a really big shout out to the Department of Education, studentaid.ed.gov. Over the last couple of years, they have done a remarkable job updating their information. They have videos that really break down the process and kind of walk you through how to complete the FAFSA. They've really added to and improved their FAQs and the questions on their website. So the majority of the questions that you as parents or students have about filing, I assure you, someone else has it. It's been asked, and there's probably a resource out there. So I would say take a look at that website first. If at looking at it, you're still not 100% sure, it's still overwhelming, you're still not fully grasping what it is you need to do or how to answer those questions, reach out to the financial aid office, reach out to SFS. We're happy to answer these questions for students who are currently enrolled, who are thinking about coming, or who just need help filing the FAFSA. That's the purpose of us being here. We have appointments available virtually over phone and Zoom. And so you don't have to come to the great city of Philadelphia to get a little help with this. We can absolutely help you virtually. But I would start with studentaid.ed.gov. You can look over the SFS website for Temple specific policies and information. And like I said, reach out to our office if you still have follow-up questions that we're happy to answer.
Awesome. Thank you so much. If you could go back to that last slide one more time, please. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming. I don't see any additional questions in the chat, but this is all of our contact information from all 3 offices. I see again, so I'll wrap up and then we'll address that last question. So if anyone has any questions at all, needs some help, just wants to get guided in the right direction, please feel free to reach out to any of us. We are here for you. I might have spoken with some of you when I was in Germany last week. I know we have some people from Stuttgart High School. We'll also be around Italy and going to your schools throughout the rest of the semester and the year. So we hope to see you in person. You can always feel free to come up to us, ask us any questions. We can put you in touch with the right person. So I just want to reiterate that we are here for you, and we hope to hear from you soon, and good luck in your application process in the coming year. Thank you all for coming so much. I think I'll wait a couple more seconds. I think there's just one question coming up in the chat. If not, then please feel free to just reach out to us directly and we can answer that for you. Here it is. I think I'll read it out loud just so the people who are watching the recording can hear as well. Wanted to ask about the primary residence. We've been overseas and had a primary residence, but have been renting it while overseas. It is our residence address for the driver's license purposes. Is this primary or not? I think that's directed to you, Cassie.
Yep. Honestly, I can't answer that question for you. You would have to choose which residence you feel best represents your permanent residence or primary residence. So if you have a home here, hypothetically in Pennsylvania, and that's where your driver's licenses are based at, that's your legal residence, that's where you're registered to vote in Pennsylvania, then I would consider that your primary. But ultimately, you get to make the decision on which residence is considered primary versus secondary. Most we can do is kind of define what it would be, but ultimately you should be the one to decide, yes, this is the primary residence. Another way to think about it is when you're a student, if your student comes to Temple, where would you live at that residence or whatnot? So, okay, good. I'm glad to see that that helped answer. Great, thank you. It's a good question.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for coming. We really appreciate you listening in, and we hope that this was a little bit helpful in your application process for university in general in the coming year. So again, please feel free to reach out to any of us. We're here for you, and we hope to speak with you soon. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.